You ever done something where you made a big mistake and you put it on somebody else? Anyone ever done that? I remember this one time we used to do this event called Bro Night, and Bro Night was for the bros. And at Bro Night we would have this portion. It was an overnighter, and we would have this portion of this night where we would do this thing called the initiation of the brotherhood. And this was the excuse for the guys to do funny and painful things and get away with it. Did you ever do that kind of stuff, Pastor Franklin? You didn't? See, you're a better man than I am. And we would do all sorts of games, some which would be illegal today, but it was what we would do. One of the games that we would do is we had this guy with a blowtorch, right? And he'd be in the kitchen, you'd walk around, you'd see the blowtorch, you'd feel the heat, and we would make them pull up their sleeves, and then we'd blindfold them. The key for all the games is blindfolds. And they'd sit down, right? And they know the blowtorch, and we put the heat right by them, and then we take a piece of ice and we put it on their arm. Every time without fail, they freak out. We take off the blindfold. See, you can trust us. We would never hurt you. And then they'd graduate from that level. You know, some of the games would involve your head in a toilet. There's all sorts of fun games, and they were just really, it was key, like early youth pastors, like games, right? And so at this point, I just moved home from Bible college, and I am not yet the youth pastor. I'm a youth leader, but I'm running this event, but my youth pastor's still there. So I'm running this event. We do the initiation. We do all these different rounds, and we get to this one round where, again, they're blindfolded. And we have this area. There's these steps, and you have to walk around the corner. And what we would do is the whole game, they'd take their shoes off, they'd take their socks off, and we would have these bottles that we would break, these glass bottles, these root beer bottles, right? And we'd break them on the ground inside a garbage bag. And so we'd break them, and they would come down not blindfolded. We'd break the bottle, and then we'd blindfold them, and then we'd break the bottle. They wouldn't know that it's in a bag, and then we would have these shattered Doritos all over the ground, right? And so they've got their shoes off, they've got their socks off, they're now blindfolded, they hear a glass bottle break, and then they're told to jump off the stairs and trust us. So it's just like I'm reliving this, wishing I could do this again. And so picture this, all right? Does anyone want to volunteer? Can I get someone to volunteer? Right there, this guy's smiling. He's like, yeah, I want to do it. Okay, will you take your shoes off? I'm just kidding. Don't take your shoes off. So why don't you stand right up? Just hop up here. Can you jump high enough? There you just stepped up. There you go. So it's about maybe 6 inches lower than this, right? So he's standing and he's blindfolded. So just cover your eyes. Okay, there you go. So he's blindfolded, and we've done 2 or 3 of these guys already, and this is the third guy. His name's Andrew. I'm like, all right, Andrew, bro, hey, just so you know, man, you can trust us, like just like you can trust God. And we're making this whole spiritual thing, like you can trust us, man. So here's what you're gonna do. I know you're blindfolded. I know you just heard us break some glass, but trust us, it's not gonna hurt. I promise. And we're like convincing him. Well, the whole time in his mind, he's a competitive dude. He's an athletic dude. Now, keep in mind, the intent was to never have someone actually barefoot jump into broken glass. Okay? So what we would do, he's standing here, and right about where the front row is where the broken glass is. And it's 2 steps, right? And right in front is where all the Doritos are. Well, he's thinking, there's no way I'm jumping onto this broken glass. So he's thinking, I'm athletic. I got hops. I'm not doing this. I'm going to jump over the broken glass. Not realizing he's fixing to jump into the broken glass. So he's there. I was like, dude, you can trust us. So on the count of 3, you just got to jump. Just step right off. You'll be fine. I promise. 2 steps. Doritos, shattered glass. Doritos, shattered glass, right? So he's there. And we're like, on 3, we want you to jump. Mind you, blindfolded, barefoot, Doritos, shattered glass, right? And so we count down 3, 2, 1. And without, this happens in slow motion, but we can't stop it. He steps back and with all of the might in his body kicks off. And he jumps, and why don't you jump as far as you can blindfold? I'm just kidding. You can jump off. But he jumps. Let's see how far you can jump. Do you want to just try? No, you don't have to blindfold yourself. That's kind of weird. You could just.
Oh, one step back?
Do you think you can make it to the chairs? No, you don't get to step back and run. You just you get one pivot foot. You know what I mean? What's your name?
Trent.
Can we give Trent a hand? You can just hop off. You're good. So he literally takes a step back and he jumps. And mind you, as he kicks off, he's got his feet first and he's going diagonal because he's trying to get we're in the Olympics now. He's trying to do, jump as far as he can. So it's feet first and it's on concrete, broken glass, Doritos, broken glass, bare feet, blindfolded. So he jumps and he's going and he lands straight into the broken glass and he slides for about 5 feet. And he hops up and before he can feel, he's like, I jumped over, and then he looks. And the bottom of his feet were so torn apart. Blood was everywhere. His feet are shattered. I'm talking shattered. Glass, just all in it. Imagine if you got your hand wet and you just smashed a bunch of Dorito crumbs and you look up and your hand's covered. That was the bottom of his feet, only it was blood and it was glass. It's amazing. Now keep in mind, this is bro night, middle of the night. We saved the best for last, so it's 2 a.m. And I've got a kid that I've almost just killed at this moment. He's losing blood and he's laughing because he's in shock. And he can't walk. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I'm like, I run up, I get my youth pastor. He's like, all right, well, we're going to need to call, we're going to need to call his mom. He's going to need to go to the hospital. So we call his mom. His mom shows up. And at this point, I hadn't been a youth pastor. I was just a youth leader. And I'd never had a parent yell at me until this moment. But it's funny because I went to my youth pastor and I'm like, hey, look, this is my fault. This is my fault. This is me. I did this. I'm so sorry. And he's like, no, you know what? Taylor, this is actually my fault because it's my event. And even though you did this, it's on me. So as his mom is yelling at me, he comes and he says, hey, actually, I'm sorry, Andrew's mom. It was me. And he takes the fall. And in that moment, I realized the power of not being in charge. I realized the power of not carrying the weight of the success of this thing. Because I did not have the title. It was my youth pastor who did. He took the fall. He took the blame. He owned the responsibility. And he did not blame me, even though I caused it. Why? Because I wasn't in charge. He was. And this is what has to happen in our day and age. That with the church, we have to realize that we are not the ones building this thing. We're not the ones who own the success of the future of the church. We're not in charge of this thing. When we're in charge, we scramble and we overcompensate and we try and figure this thing out. And we reorder things and we carry the weight of our success. But if there's anything that we've realized over the last 16 months or really over the last 2,000 years is that it's never been us and it never will be us building this thing. It is not on you to build the church. It's not on you to make the church successful, and it is not on you to market the church to the world. God said this in this moment. Jesus says, it is me who's building my church. And when it's me building the church, the gates of hell will not prevail against it. But when it's me building the church, Taylor, when it's us building the church, young people, then it is the gates of hell that will prevail against it because it will win against a church that is not being built by Jesus. But when it's us, it dies. When it's Jesus building the church, guess what? doesn't matter what scandal, doesn't matter what pressure, doesn't matter what pandemic, doesn't matter what bad thing that the church has perpetuated, the gates of hell cannot even prevail against it. Why? Because Jesus is the one building it. And if there's anything for you and I to understand today, that we are a part of something that is much greater than ourselves. It is the church of Jesus Christ, and Jesus is building it. It is a victorious church. It is a beautiful church. It is a church that will not die. It is a church full of broken, messed up people, but it's a church that Jesus loved enough to come and die and live a perfect life. And he died on the cross, and they put a crown in his head, and they ripped his back apart, and they put nails through his hands and his feet, and they spit on him and put a spear through his side, and he carried the shame of the world so much. Like, he did this. Why? Because he wanted you to know that he loves the church, and he's building it, and he died for it, and he's never going to stop building it. And when we get into that, then we now are a part of something that is much greater than ourselves. It is the church. And Jesus is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Jesus is building it, friends. And why do I tell this to you tonight? What does this have to do with our theme, United, right? Because what has happened in our culture as of late is all of these divisions have been exposed. And what the church has been about, oftentimes we've gotten distracted and we've become about the thing that we were never meant to be about. And so now the world is coming and yelling at the church and saying, you got this wrong. And now the church has turned in on itself, and we're realizing we were building on the wrong thing. Have you seen this happen? Have you seen any of your friends struggle with, like, I don't know, maybe by show of hands, how many of you, whether it's yourself or somebody that you know, that in the last 16 months has questioned their faith? And how many of those people are questioning their faith in part because of what they're seeing around the church in our nation, and the corruption and the scandals and the infidelities and all of that kind of stuff? Raise your hand if you know someone who's discouraged by that, right? What is this? This is a failure, not because of Jesus, but it's a failure because we put our hope in the wrong thing. So now all of these things are being exposed. So Jesus says, who do people say that I am? And they answer, and they start to go through these different things. But then he says, who do you say that I am? He says, you're the Messiah. You're it. You're the one we've been waiting for. You're the dude. You're the guy. You're it. And Jesus says, on this I will build my church. So the question is what is Jesus building his church on? Look at the context of this moment. Jesus having this moment, and he gives them kind of this trick question, right? You ever had a trick question? Any of you married in here? Any married people? And it's an outfit question, like, does this make me look? And it's like, that's a trick question. I'm not supposed to answer that one. And Jesus asks this trick question. He says, who do people say that I am? Who do people say that I am? And one of the things that I've noticed in the last couple of years is that we have gotten really good talking about God. We've had a lot of people in our context talking about how they want to see revival, and they want to see deeper, and they want to see more prayer, and they want to see more things, and they want to see, and they want to see, and they wish there was more, and why don't we, and I wish we did, and if God's going to move, then we need to do this, and we, and you know what it is? It's a bunch of people say, and Jesus is saying, who do people say that I am? And it's a trick question, because he really doesn't give a crap who people say that I am. Here's the thing that you need to understand, is that Jesus is simultaneously asking each one of you, who do others say that I am? But more importantly, who do you know that I am? And if you know what everybody else is saying, but you can't answer it for yourself, then you've missed something. And what culture is realizing now is that there was a whole entire group of Christians who knew what everybody else had to say about Jesus, what everybody else had to say about Christianity. But when push came to shove, they did not have a revelation from God about who Jesus was to them. And so we've come to this failure, this pressure point where it's like, who do people say that I am? Well, I know who people say that you are. Like, you're Jesus, like you're a prophet, and you have all these great things that you've got done, and there's these Instagram memes that talk about it and all this kind of stuff, and we can answer all of that. What's the culture's opinion about church and all of these things, and we are versed in it, and we can articulate it perfectly. But when's the last time that you, on your own, in private, and you didn't tell anybody about it, that you had a moment with God for yourself? That when you were on your own knees and nobody else saw you, but God saw you and he had a moment with you where he revealed a part of his character to you in a way that you could not have interpreted it through the lens of culture or the lens of others or others' expectations or what you thought about yourself or your sins or your struggles or whatever. But it's a moment where you and God, now God is downloading something to you. And what's happened is we've had so many, dozens within our church, young people, old, who what has happened is that we've realized that they knew and they still know what everybody else has to say about God and what everybody else has to say about the church, and yet they have no experience with God themselves. So when COVID happens, church is taken away. Rhythms are taken away. All the struggles are now here. And now you're seeing these cultural issues come up, which are, many of them are at the core of God's heart, but they're seeking to achieve the kingdom without the king. And there's this idea that we need to figure these things out. We need to do these things. And Jesus is saying, like, yo, I know what people have to say, but I got something to say to you too. And my word's going to trump theirs. My word's better than theirs. But if you don't get mine, then you're going to live your life trying to pivot according to what culture has to say, and you'll be exhausted. Why? Because you'll come to the end and you'll realize I was on a journey that ended in futility. There was nothing there because I was seeking the wrong thing. I know what people have to say, but I don't have a revelation from God about who Jesus is. And if my invitation to you was anything tonight, it is stop knowing what everybody else has to say about Jesus and start knowing what Jesus has to say to you. Because the church that Jesus is saying that he's building, did you know that he didn't build it on Peter? Like we've heard these sermons, and I've preached it before, right? So Peter's name, Petra, in the original language, Petra, meaning rock. And he says, on this rock, I'll build my church. So it's this poetic moment, like Peter's name means rock, and I'm going to build my church on the rock. And it's this whole thing like, oh, wow, God is so good. Like, but it has nothing to do with his name. Like, Jesus isn't building his church on people. Did you know that? What Jesus is building his church on, this is what you need to get. Jesus is building his church on revelation and confession. That's what he's building his church on. He's not building his church on people. Why? Because people suck. But you know what nobody can argue with? Is that I've had a revelation of who Jesus is in my life. And you know what? Nobody can take that away from me. I'll take a bullet for the church. I'll die for the church. I'll die for Jesus. Like, you come in here and say, hey, it's Jesus, or, if you say, yes, Jesus, die. And if you don't, then you're good. I'll die. I have a revelation of who Jesus is, and you cannot take that away from me. The church is not built on me because I am fallible. I am messed up. I'm incomplete. I'm selfish. I'm full of thoughts that do not belong in me, and yet I still entertain them. I'm jealous, and I'm insecure, and I'm lazy at times, and I'm old, and I'm out of shape on top of it all. And I'm not good. Jesus isn't building his church on me. You know what he's building it on? The revelation that imperfect me has had about perfect Jesus. That's what he's building it on. He's building it on a revelation that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, the one who all of Scripture points to. It is Jesus. He's building his church on a revelation of that truth and the confession of that truth to be true. That's what he's building his church on. He's not building his church on perfect people. He's not building his church on imperfect people. He's not building his church on people. He's building his church with people who are building it on a revelation and a confession that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of the Father. That's it. That's it. So what should you stake your entire life on? The revelation and confession that Jesus is Lord. There's no more important truth ever. That's it. I'll get off the stage now. I'll be done. You can leave. If you know nothing else but this, is God doesn't need you to build his church. What God is asking of you is your revelation and confession that he's building it. And when you get that, now you are linking arms. I love what you did earlier. Linking arms. You're a part of a tapestry of something much greater than yourself. Friends, COVID tried to take the church out, and it's trying. And division in our country has tried. And race and these wars and these ideologies and all of the political left and right and all of this stuff. It is attempting, and I'm just going to encourage you for a second. It is going to fail at trying to take the church out. The worse the times, the darker the dark, the brighter the light. The church is not dying, friends. The church is growing. And the best way for it to grow is when pressure comes. Why? Because it forces us to get to a place. Do we or do we not have a revelation of who Jesus truly is? And some of you struggling with doubt right now, and you're deconstructing your faith, or your friends are. And you're just in this place. I don't know. I'm here to say, first of all, that this is the place to do it. Like that you can ask questions. As long as you have questions and you're not wanting to just like share a witty meme that has a nice font and a good aesthetic that makes you feel good, like that you partnered with the world with some bad ideology that will die in a few weeks. Like bigger than that, but like if you have real questions, ask them, wrestle. But I'm here to tell you that Jesus is building his church, and whether you like it or not, he's doing it. And the gates of hell will try, and they will fail to prevail against the church. It is the church of Jesus Christ. And if I'm going to stake my life in anything, it's on that truth, that Jesus is Lord. Though none go with me, still I will follow. The cross before me, the world behind me. I don't give a flying crap if anybody goes with me. I don't care if everybody leaves me. I've had a lot of people leave me in this season. I've had a lot of discouragement. And some of it reveals my own humanity. But man, it has sucked big time. I've hated it. It's been discouraging. I've had people who look at me and they blame me for their leaving. And it hurts. But friends, I'm discouraged, but I'm not deterred. I'm still following Jesus because he's the only one who's got the words of life. He's the only way worth following. He's the only way that I can experience salvation. He's the only way that I'll get purpose. He's the only way worth living. He's it. And I don't care if I have to get beat down. I don't care if I have to lose money. I don't care if I lose friends. I don't care if people point their fingers at me. I'm following Jesus, and I'm putting my feet in both feet on the ground, which is Christ, the solid rock, and I will look to him, and I will know that as I confess what has been revealed to me, that Jesus is Lord, that on that revelation and confession, Jesus is going to build his church. You know what happens though? What the world is getting from us is getting revelation or confession, but they're not getting both. So some of us in here, we're all confession. but no revelation. Others of us, you know what we are? All revelation, no confession. And some of you are like, Taylor, I'm with you, bro. Like, Jesus has been the only thing that's gotten me through this season. But then you watch how you talk. And everything that comes out of your mouth would say the opposite. Everything that comes out of your phone's mouth on your story would say the opposite. I have faith, but I live in fear. I believe in Jesus, but I also believe in bad ideas. I'm called to love people, but I'm completely unkind, and I would use other words, but I would never be invited to come and hang out with you again, so I'm not going to. But you hear what I'm saying? Everything that is coming out of us would say the opposite of everything that has been revealed to us. Jesus loved me in spite of my sin, but everything that I portray is judgmental. If you don't think like me, talk like me, act like me, then you are not part of me. And so what happens is our confession doesn't match our revelation. Some of you, you know Jesus. You believe in Jesus, and you may not even be in a place where you're doubting, like you've never been more sure of who Jesus is, and you love him and you know he loves you. But your confession does not match your revelation. We've got to get back to the place where our revelation is followed by confession. See, because in this moment, Jesus says, who do people say that I am? And they confess something that hadn't been revealed. Like, get this, right? They said, who do people say that I am? Well, some say you're this prophet, this guy, this, that, whatever. You're the fulfillment of this thing or that thing. You know what they were saying? They were saying, this is something I'm wrestling with. This is something I'm not sure of. This is something I haven't been convinced of. They're still in this in-between space. What is it? They're confessing something that isn't revealed. Because this is where it also goes. Some of you, your confession's bad, but your revelation's right. Others of you, your confession is right. You're trying to will yourself into this thing. But you haven't actually had a moment with God where he's truly been revealed to you. I'll invite the band to come up if we can as we get ready to close. I think the crisis of our day, the answer is this, is that we get back to a place where we match both confession and revelation. Confession, what are we confessing? That Jesus Christ is the Messiah. He is Lord to the glory of the Father. What's the revelation? That Jesus Christ is Lord. He's the Messiah. He's the one. He's it. How do you get purpose? Jesus. How do you get future? Jesus. How do you find comfort? Jesus. How do you look ahead? Jesus. How do you not be discouraged? Jesus. How do you get picked up when you fail? Jesus. How do you look at everything that's going on and not just want to give up? Jesus. How do you know what God has called you to? Jesus. How do you anything? It's Jesus. That's it. He's it.